I never imagined that the color of my daughter's skin would become the thing I feared most in this world. That a shade of yellow could mean the difference between the life I knew and a nightmare I wasn't prepared to face. But sometimes the worst moments in our lives don't announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Sometimes they arrive quietly in the soft morning light, when you're just trying to make breakfast and get through another ordinary day. We live in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows your name and your business, whether you want them to or not. My name is Rachel, and for the past 12 years, my entire world has revolved around my daughter, Emma. My husband, David, works as a mechanic at the local auto shop, the same one his father owned before him. We're simple people. We don't have much, but what we have, we've built with our own hands and a lot of love. Emma has always been our sunshine, from the moment she was born. With those huge green eyes and that infectious giggle, she lit up every room she entered. She's the kind of kid who brings home stray cats and cries during animal documentaries. She's sensitive, creative, and fiercely loyal to the people she loves. Her room is covered in drawings she's made, paintings of sunsets and forests and imaginary creatures that live only in her mind. I'm a school nurse at the elementary school 3 blocks from our house. I've spent years looking after other people's children, wiping tears, bandaging scraped knees, calling worried parents about fevers and stomach bugs. I thought I knew what it meant to care for a sick child. I thought I understood fear, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what was coming. David is the strong, silent type. He shows his love through actions, not words. He's the man who wakes up early to shovel the driveway before anyone else is awake, who fixes things before you even notice they're broken. He doesn't talk much about his feelings, and for years I thought I understood him completely. But this story isn't just about Emma. It's about all of us, and the secrets we keep even from the people we love most. It started in March, right when the rain was finally giving way to spring. Emma had been complaining about being tired. At first, I didn't think much of it. She was 12, in that awkward phase between childhood and adolescence where sleep schedules go haywire and bodies are changing faster than minds can keep up. She'd stay up late reading under her covers with a flashlight and drag herself out of bed in the morning like she was carrying the weight of the world. But then she stopped eating as much. Emma, who used to devour everything I put in front of her, started pushing food around her plate. She'd take a few bites and say she was full. She'd ask to be excused and disappear into her room. David and I exchanged looks across the dinner table, concerned but not yet alarmed. Maybe it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed about school or friend drama or something she wasn't ready to talk about. Then came the nausea. She'd wake up in the morning and run to the bathroom. I'd stand outside the door listening to her retching, my heart breaking a little more each time. When I asked her how she felt, she'd just shrug and say she was fine. Fine. That word became like a wall between us. I started to wonder if I was missing something, if there was something happening in her life that she wasn't telling me about. David tried to be reassuring. He'd say things like, "Kids get sick. It's probably just a bug going around. She'll bounce back." But I could see the worry in his eyes, too. The way he'd watch her when he thought no one was looking. The way his jaw would tighten when she'd leave the table after barely eating anything. We were both scared, but neither of us wanted to admit it out loud. As if speaking the fear would make it real. It was a Tuesday morning in late March when everything changed. I walked into Emma's room to wake her up for school, and the moment I pulled back her curtains and sunlight streamed across her face, I knew something was terribly, horrifically wrong. Her skin was yellow. Not pale, not flushed, but yellow. A sickly, unnatural shade that made my blood run cold. Her eyes, those beautiful green eyes, the whites had turned the color of old parchment. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. My mind racing through every medical textbook I'd ever read, every training session I'd attended, every worst-case scenario I tried not to imagine. "Emma, what's wrong with your skin?" I whispered. Trying to keep the panic out of my voice, She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, confused by my tone. "What do you mean?" I grabbed her hand and pulled her to the mirror. She stared at her reflection, and I watched her face crumble as she realized what I was seeing. The yellow tint that covered her skin, like she'd been dipped in paint. Her hand flew to her face, touching her cheeks, her forehead, as if she could wipe it away. "Mom, what's happening to me?" Her voice cracked, and that sound, that terrified crack in her voice, is something I'll carry with me forever. I didn't have an answer, but I knew what that yellow meant. Jaundice. Something was wrong with her liver. And liver problems in children, they weren't just serious, they could be catastrophic. I called David at the shop. He dropped everything and came home. When he saw Emma, his face went white. For the first time in our marriage, I saw my unshakable husband look genuinely terrified. We didn't discuss it. We didn't need to. Within 20 minutes, we were in the car, speeding toward the regional hospital 40 minutes away. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Nurses took one look at Emma and fast-tracked her through triage. They drew blood, so many vials of blood, that Emma started crying and asking if they were taking all of it. David held her hand while I filled out forms with shaking fingers, my nurse training completely abandoning me when I needed it most. I couldn't remember Emma's medication history. I couldn't remember the dates of her vaccinations. All I could see was that yellow skin, and all I could think was, please, God, please let her be okay. The doctor who came to see us was young. Too young, I thought irrationally. Dr. Harrison. She had kind eyes, but a serious expression that made my stomach drop. She explained that they'd run a full liver panel, that they needed to determine what was causing the jaundice, that there were many possibilities. Hepatitis, autoimmune disorders, genetic conditions, tumors. That last word hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Tumors. I felt David's hand grip mine so tightly it hurt, but I didn't pull away. We needed that pain, that physical anchor to reality, because everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Emma was admitted immediately. They set her up in a pediatric room with cartoon characters on the walls that seemed grotesquely cheerful, given the circumstances. More tests, an ultrasound, a CT scan. Emma was so brave through all of it, braver than I could ever be. She didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling and asked quiet questions about what each machine did, what they were looking for, whether it would hurt. It was late that night, after Emma had finally fallen asleep from exhaustion and fear, that Dr. Harrison came back with the initial results. David and I stood in the hallway under those horrible fluorescent lights, and she delivered the news that would change everything. The liver function tests show significant elevation in her bilirubin and liver enzymes. Her liver is definitely compromised. But here's where it gets complicated. We found something unusual in her blood work. There are markers that suggest this isn't a typical viral hepatitis or acute liver failure. We need to run more specialized tests, but I want you to be prepared. This could be a rare genetic condition, possibly Wilson's disease or something similar. Or it could be autoimmune hepatitis. Both are serious. Both require immediate and aggressive treatment. What does that mean? David's voice was barely a whisper. What does serious mean? Dr. Harrison looked at both of us with an expression I recognized from my own years of delivering bad news to parents. Compassion mixed with professional distance. It means we need to act fast. It means her liver is under attack, either from her own immune system or from a genetic disorder that's causing copper to build up in her tissues. If we don't get this under control, if we can't stop the progression, she could need a liver transplant. And even with treatment, this is likely something she'll be managing for the rest of her life. The hallway tilted. I felt David catch me, his arm around my waist, holding me up. A transplant. Our 12-year-old daughter might need a liver transplant, might not live without one. The world as I knew it had just shattered into a million pieces, and I had no idea how to put it back together. The next few days were a nightmare that I moved through like I was underwater. Everything felt slow and muffled and impossible. They kept Emma in the hospital while they ran more tests. Each morning, I'd wake up on the uncomfortable cot they'd brought into her room and hope that maybe I'd dreamed it all. But then I'd see her yellow skin, still that terrible shade, despite the treatments they'd started, and reality would crash back down on me. David was there every day, but something was different about him. He was quieter than usual, which was saying something for a man who already spoke in short sentences. He'd sit in the chair by Emma's bed, holding her hand, but his mind seemed somewhere else, somewhere dark and distant that I couldn't reach. On the third day, after another round of tests, Dr. Harrison came in with a specialist, Dr. Chen, a hepatologist from the university hospital. They explained that the results pointed toward autoimmune, hepatitis, a condition where Emma's immune system was attacking her own liver. It was rare in children, they said. The treatment would involve high-dose steroids and immunosuppressants to stop the attack. If caught early enough, they said, the liver could recover. But Emma would need to be on medication for years, possibly forever. And there was always the risk of the disease progressing despite treatment. Can I give her part of my liver? I asked immediately. I'd donate anything, do anything. Dr. Chen smiled gently. We're not there yet. Let's see how she responds to the immunosuppression. But yes, if it came to that, you or your husband could potentially be donors. We'd need to do compatibility testing. I looked at David, expecting to see the same desperate willingness I felt. Instead, I saw something that looked almost like fear. No, not fear. Something else. Something I couldn't quite name. That night, after Emma fell asleep, David asked me to step outside with him. We stood in the hospital parking lot under the harsh security lights, the spring air still cold enough to see our breath. He lit a cigarette, something he'd supposedly quit years ago, and took a long drag before speaking. Rachel, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago. My heart started pounding. In the midst of everything. With Emma, I couldn't imagine what else could possibly matter. But the look on his face, the way he couldn't meet my eyes, told me this was big. When I was 21, before I met you, I had a serious drinking problem. I mean, really serious. I ended up in the hospital with liver damage, cirrhosis, early stages. The doctors said I was lucky, that if I stopped drinking immediately and completely, my liver might recover. So I did. I quit cold turkey and never touched another drop. I stared at him, trying to process this information. In 15 years of marriage, he'd never mentioned any of this. Sure, I'd noticed he never drank alcohol, but he'd always said he just didn't like the taste. I'd never pushed it. Why didn't you tell me? The words came out sharper than I intended, because I was ashamed, because I didn't want you to see me as broken, because by the time we met, it felt like a different life, a different person. He finally looked at me, his eyes wet. But now, with Emma, if she needs a donor, I might not be able to help her. My liver, even though it recovered, it's not pristine. They might not accept me as a donor because of my history. The weight of this revelation, on top of everything else, was almost too much to bear. But looking at David, seeing the raw pain and guilt on his face, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about his past or his secrets. This was about Emma and about the fact that we were in this together, damaged and imperfect as we were. I reached for his hand. We'll figure it out. If you can't donate, then I will, or we'll find someone else. But David, you can't carry this guilt. Whatever happened before we met, that's not who you are now. You're the man who's been here every single day, the man who held our daughter's hand through every test. That's what matters. He pulled me into his arms, and we stood there in that parking lot, holding each other like we were the only solid things in a world that had gone liquid and unstable. I felt his tears on my neck, and I let myself cry too, for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Sometimes you have to break down before you can build back up. The next week brought small improvements. The steroids and immunosuppressants started to work. Emma's liver enzymes began to drop, slowly but steadily. The yellow in her skin started to fade, first from her face, then her arms, until she looked more like herself again. She still felt exhausted, still had days where the nausea came back, but she was fighting. Our girl was a fighter, but the emotional toll was showing on all of us. Emma had nightmares about hospitals and needles. She'd wake up screaming, and I'd run to her room to find her tangled in her sheets, crying that she didn't want to die. She's 12. 12-year-olds shouldn't have to think about death. They should be thinking about school dances and friendship bracelets and what they want to be when they grow up, not whether they'll live long enough to grow up at all. I had to take a leave of absence from work. I couldn't focus on other people's children when my own daughter was fighting for her life. The school was understanding, but I felt like I was abandoning my post, leaving those kids without someone to look after them. Guilt became my constant companion. Guilt for not noticing Emma's symptoms sooner. Guilt for not being there for the other children at school. Guilt for the anger I felt toward David for keeping secrets, even though I knew it was irrational. David threw himself into work, coming home late, covered in grease and exhaustion. I knew he was trying to distract himself, trying to outrun the fear by staying busy. But it was creating distance between us at a time when we needed each other most. We'd pass each other in the hallway like roommates rather than partners. We'd sit at Emma's bedside in silence, each lost in our own thoughts and fears. It was Emma who finally broke through our walls. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after her diagnosis, she looked at both of us sitting on opposite sides of her bed and said, in that direct way only children can manage, "You guys are acting weird. Like you're mad at each other. Please don't be mad. I need you both." David and I looked at each other across her hospital bed, really looked at each other for the first time in weeks. And in his eyes, I saw my own fear and exhaustion and desperate love reflected back at me. Emma was right. We were so caught up in our individual pain that we'd forgotten we were supposed to be a team. That night, we talked, really talked. I told him about my fear that I'd failed as a mother by not recognizing the signs sooner. He told me about the crushing guilt he felt about his past, about feeling like Emma's illness was somehow cosmic punishment for his mistakes. We both cried, we both apologized, and slowly, painfully, we started to find our way back to each other. The doctors scheduled a liver biopsy to get a better picture of the damage and to confirm the diagnosis. It was a risky procedure, especially with Emma's compromised liver function, but Dr. Chen said it was necessary to plan the long-term treatment. The morning of the biopsy, Emma was terrified. She gripped my hand so tightly I thought my bones might break. "What if something goes wrong? What if I don't wake up?" "You'll wake up. I promise you'll wake up." I tried to sound confident, but inside I was screaming the same questions. What if something went wrong? What if I was making a promise I couldn't keep? David leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You're the strongest person I know, Emma Bean. You're going to get through this, and when you do, we're going to go on that camping trip we've been planning. Just the three of us, up in the mountains, where you can see every star in the sky." Emma smiled weakly. "Even the ones that aren't really there anymore?" It was a reference to something David had taught her years ago about how light from distant stars takes so long to reach us that some of the stars we see have actually already died. "We're just seeing their light from the past, even those ones," David said. "Especially those ones." The biopsy took 2 hours, but it felt like 2 years. David and I sat in the waiting room, not talking, just existing in the same space, holding hands like lifelines. When Dr. Chen finally came out, her expression was neutral, which I'd learned meant the news wasn't great, but wasn't catastrophic either. "The biopsy confirms autoimmune hepatitis," she said. "There's moderate scarring, but not as much as I feared. The immunosuppression is working. Her liver is starting to heal. This is good news, better than I expected at this stage." But I could hear the unspoken word hanging in the air, but she'll need to stay on medication indefinitely, and we'll need to monitor her closely. Autoimmune hepatitis can relapse, especially in the first few years. She'll need blood work every month, clinic visits every 3 months. This is now a chronic condition that she'll be managing for life. And there's always the possibility, though, we hope it won't come to this, that the disease could progress despite treatment. So we're not out of the woods, David said. Dr. Chen shook her head. No, but you're on the right path. And that's more than many families in your situation can say. I realized in that moment that this was my new normal, not the resolution I'd hoped. For where Emma would be cured, and we'd go back to our simple life like nothing had happened. This was different. This was learning to live with uncertainty, with constant vigilance, with the knowledge that danger could always be lurking just around the corner. It was terrifying. But we were alive. Emma was alive, and that had to be enough. Emma came home from the hospital 6 weeks after that first terrible morning when I saw her yellow skin. She was thinner, more fragile looking, but the yellow was gone. Her eyes were clear again. She moved slowly, still exhausted from everything her body had been through. But she moved. She smiled. She was here. We had to make changes, big ones. Emma's diet had to be carefully monitored. No more processed foods, nothing that would stress her liver. She had to take a handful of pills every morning and evening. We had to watch for signs of infection, since the immunosuppressants made her vulnerable. She couldn't be around sick people. Simple things that other families took for granted, like going to a crowded movie theater or having friends over for a sleepover, became complicated risk assessments. But we adapted. We learned. David turned into an amateur nutritionist, researching liver-friendly recipes and cooking elaborate meals that Emma would actually eat. I became an expert at reading medical journals, understanding her blood work results, knowing every possible side effect of every medication she was taking. Emma, somehow, became the most well-adjusted of all of us. She accepted her new reality with a grace that left me in awe. She took her pills without complaint. She didn't resent the dietary restrictions or the constant doctor's appointments. She just lived with a wisdom beyond her 12 years. 3 months after she came home, we finally took that camping trip David had promised. We drove up into the Cascade Mountains to a campsite by a pristine lake where the only sounds were birdsong and wind through the pines. We pitched our tent, made a fire, cooked hot dogs on sticks like we were just a normal family on a normal vacation. That night, lying on our backs on a blanket outside the tent, looking up at the infinite expanse of stars, Emma said something that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. Mom, Dad, I know you've been scared. I've been scared too. But I don't want to spend whatever time I have being afraid. I want to live, really live, even if my liver never gets completely better, even if I have to take pills forever. I'm still here. That's what matters, right? David's voice was thick with emotion when he answered. That's all that matters, Emma Bean. That's all that's ever mattered. And in that moment, under those ancient stars, some dead and some still burning millions of miles away, I understood something I'd been too frightened and too proud to see. Perfection was a lie. The idea that we could control everything, protect everyone, keep tragedy at bay through sheer force of will, that was an illusion. Life was messy and uncertain and sometimes unbearably painful, but it was also beautiful. It was also full of moments like this, where love felt bigger than fear, where being together felt like enough. David had kept secrets because he was ashamed of his brokenness. I'd been so focused on being the caretaker, the one who had all the answers, that I'd forgotten how to be vulnerable. Emma was facing a chronic illness that would define her life in ways we were only beginning to understand. We were all broken in different ways, but we were broken together, and somehow that made us stronger than we'd ever been when we were trying to be perfect. The months that followed weren't easy. Emma had a relapse 6 months later, her liver enzymes spiking again, the yellow tinge returning to her skin. We caught it early this time, adjusted her medications, and got it back under control. But each relapse was a reminder that this wasn't over, would never really be over. We had to learn to live in the space between crisis and normalcy, always vigilant, but trying not to let fear consume us. David started going to therapy. He said he needed to deal with his past, to stop running from it. I was proud of him for that. It couldn't have been easy, excavating all those buried memories and failures, but he did it. And slowly I watched him become more present, more able to talk about his feelings, more connected to both Emma and me. I went back to work eventually, but everything felt different. When a parent would come to my office, worried about their child's mysterious symptoms, I didn't just see a medical case anymore. I saw terror. I saw love. I saw the desperate hope that I could make everything okay. And sometimes I could, but sometimes I couldn't. And I learned that was okay too. My job wasn't to fix everything. It was to care, to be present, to help families navigate the uncertain waters of childhood illness with compassion and honesty. Emma turned 13, then 14. She started high school, made new friends who knew about her condition and didn't treat her like she was fragile. She joined the art club and started painting huge, colorful canvases that she hung all over her bedroom walls. She fell in love with poetry, writing verses about resilience and beauty and the strange gift of surviving something you thought might destroy you. On her 14th birthday, she showed me a poem she'd written. It was called Yellow, and it was about that morning, 2 years earlier, when everything changed. But it wasn't sad. It was hopeful. It talked about how that terrible yellow had faded, how her body had found a way to heal even while staying broken, how fear had transformed into gratitude for every ordinary day. I cried reading it. Happy tears this time. Proud tears, because my daughter had taken the worst experience of her young life and turned it into art, into meaning, into something that might help someone else who was scared and hurting and looking for a reason to hope. I still have hard days, days when the fear comes rushing back and I find myself checking Emma's skin for any hint of yellow, watching her every move for signs that something is wrong. David has those days too. We all do. But we've learned that fear doesn't have to be the boss of us. It can exist alongside joy, alongside love, alongside the simple pleasure of being alive and together. If I could go back to that morning in March when I pulled back Emma's curtains and saw her yellow skin, would I change anything? Part of me wants to say yes. I want to say I'd go back and catch it sooner, prevent the worst of the damage, spare us all that pain and terror. But the truth is more complicated than that, because that experience, as horrible as it was, taught us something we desperately needed to learn. It taught us that we're not in control, that life is fragile and precious and can change in an instant, that secrets and pride and the illusion of perfection will only separate us from the people we love, that being broken doesn't mean being beyond repair. Emma's liver will always be compromised. She'll always be one blood test away from another crisis. But she's here, she's thriving, she's becoming exactly who she's meant to be, and that person is extraordinary. Not despite her illness, but maybe in some strange way, because of it. Because she's learned things about resilience and gratitude that most people don't learn until they're much older, if they ever learn them at all. And you? Have you ever faced something that changed the way you see your family, your life, your own fragility? I'd love to hear your story, because in the end, we're all just trying to navigate this messy, beautiful, terrifying journey called life. And maybe, by sharing our stories, by being honest about our fears and our failures and our small victories, we can help each other find the courage to keep going. Subscribe for more real-life stories that touch the heart, because everyone has a story worth telling. Everyone has a moment when everything changed, and sometimes Hearing someone else's story is exactly what we need to make sense of our own.